Hello everybody. In this video, I would like to go over the tables and show you another structure of tables that I have used. So this is my rendered version, but before I get into the code, you see that I do have two tables in here. One of them is this one, the main one right here, and then the other one is a table right here. Another thing I would like to include here is I am actually doing a little column split over here just to show you how I can use that column split with my cascading style sheet. So this is my rendered page, and let's go through the code and the cascading style sheet that goes along with it. So let me minimize this and bring the code up here. So this is my page that is the HTML. So as you can see over here, just like our previous programs, I am using two cascading style sheets, and I am using, this is my external cascading style sheet, and I'm using the char set, which is the UTF-8, and then everything is included within my head section. And if I go up, I do have an HTML that starts my HTML page, and then I have a body, and in my body I have a header section with a logo that I brought in, which is basically a logo for our school. And here is my alt tag, and that is going inside the header section of my body. Remember, my header, these are sections that HTML5 allows me to create within my body. Now I have a nav bar, and at the nav bar I have created some navigation elements. Of course, it does not take you anywhere, as you can see over here, but I kind of try to mimic our Daytona State website and add the nav bar items at the top. Then I have another section. So I had completed my header section, then I had a nav bar, and then I have a section, and within my section I have a table, and I am creating an ID for my table. You also see a little summary that I have over here, which basically tells me what the table is all about. And then I have a caption tag, and these caption tags are dual tags, which means I have to open one, I have to close one. And then these are my reservations that I want to do. Break takes me to the next line. So this is what my break tag would do. Now also, the break tag is a single tag. It's not a dual, or it's not a pair tag, so it can work with a single tag. Then I have my column group, and within my column group I defined my first column. I defined a class called first column, and then I defined another one called time columns. But I wanted to point out, here is a span. Basically what it means is I basically span the entire column of 18 columns that I had. So basically you're going to see that it's a long column that I just created. Let me bring my rendered page out. So this is my nav bar over here. This is my reservation with a break tag that is making my Wednesday, March 24th come to the next line. And here is that tag that I'm talking about, okay? The span that I'm talking about. When I have my first column, I said I want to span it through 18 columns. So that's my big tag big span that I have right here, okay? If you count the number of columns, there are 18 of them, so this is where I have that. So span is 18, okay? Now I go to the table head, and that's where I have my let me move this out of your way, and that's where I have this morning, noon, and afternoon. So that's where I had broken it out. So if you look at the table, it is actually a morning session and an afternoon session with a lunch break in between. So At the heading, my morning has 8 spans, so it is all spanning across all the columns. And then my noon is spread across 2, and my afternoon is spread across 8. So in this particular row, I actually have 3 columns, and the first column is spanning over 8 columns, the second one is spanning over 2, and the third one is spanning over 8. So here is an example of a column span that I can use with my table. After I finish my table row here, I go to the next table, but in this one, I actually have all the individual columns. If you count, you'll see that there are probably about 18 columns there. 16, 17, 8 plus 8, 16 plus 2, 18. So you have room, and then everything is broken in a half an hour break. So all the table headers that you see inside the table row are basically individual columns. I end my table head, and then I go to my table body, and in my table body I again start my table row. This is a different row that I start. My table header shows writes electronics room. Remember, my table header is going to make it default bold, and then my table data is the one that is giving me all the individual columns, but I also have some spans here. So my column span with 4, 4, 2 basically means I'm spanning my 4 columns and spanning my next 4 columns. And NBSP is non-breaking space. So if I want to give a space but and still leave the column blank, I can do that. And these are basically my items that I had put in my individual columns. So I continue my table body and then go to the next row. Again, I have some spans over here, and I go to the next row. Again, I have some spans over here. So you can see that my first row has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns, and individual columns spans across multiple columns. This one actually has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 again, but look at this one. This one only has 4 because again I have spanned it across. This one only has 3 because the first one has a table heading, computer programming, and then there's a column span of 14, which basically spans all my 14 columns, and then so on and so forth. So here is my table, and once I finish my table body, I end my table tab, and now I start another section, and in this one I actually identified the class as left, and here are some comments that I wrote. So that's my P. This is within my paragraph tag, another paragraph I have. Now this is my next one. So now you can see that here is my section, and I define it as with a class, and I call it right. So this is the one that goes to the right section. So this section comes to the left, and then you have the right section. And you will see that this class, that way I identified my section with my cascading style sheet, I can associate some styling which is going to do some column rules. Okay, this is my section in the right side, and here I have the data definition, the data terms and data definitions, data terms and data definitions. So that would give me those that table-like option where you have electronics room with the maximum capacity and a number, another room with maximum capacity and the number. So this is my section, and again I would be controlling this with my cascading style sheet, and at the end I have a footer, okay, which has an address, and this is my address, and now I'm going to end my body. So that's my basic HTML page. Let's look at the cascading style sheet, and I have 2, and the first one is the schedule, and this is the one with the table. Now you will see that I have identified the table as S table. So if I go back and look at my table right here, okay, so my table with this ID of S table is telling me, and I need to close my table tag. Okay, I'm IDing my table as S table, and in my style sheet I will refer to that as this number sign, an S table, and then this is going to be my property, and these are my values. This is my selector. Okay, so my width, font size, my border collapse, my table caption, the style that goes along with it, my table data, my table header. Okay, so these are all the ones that I have. My border is blue, and you can change these things just to see how things are going to be. This is my first column. So remember, if you go back and look at the column, you see that you have identified some of those things. So see how I have my first column right here. So that's the styling for this is controlled by this. Okay, so this is my light blue, and then you have my time columns. And again, if you go back over here, you will see there's a time column right here I've identified, and now I can associate my time column over here. My table head, and again I have a border, a color, a background color, and you can make some changes with this background color. And if I bring my table over here, you see this background color over here. So if I make some changes in this background color, let's say I do 44 and 156, and again I don't have a clue as to what these colors is going to turn out to be, but we'll just try this and see. If I save it and I go back and refresh it, you see how my color has changed. And I really got lucky with this because I kind of wanted that blue theme going all the way across, but it just turned out to be a little darker shade of a blue. So that's basically how you can change that. So this is my table head, and this is my color that I'm controlling, my border, my font color. This is my font color, which is white, and my background color. And I can continue with it. So here is my table header, again identified with my S table, and this is my text align, my font weight. So this is how I'm controlling my schedule. This is only for the table. Okay, now let's look at my other cascading style sheet, which I'm calling it HCC, and here I am controlling my styling through this. So I have my nav header, section, article, a side footer. This is all using the same property. So these are my selectors on my left, separated by comma, and then you have the display block, and then you have the property and the value, and then I have body. This is something new that you've seen for the first time, font size inherit, which basically means that once I define my font size, you will basically inherit that font size throughout the page, so or throughout the web page, which uses the same external style sheet. So here is my font size, my margin, my padding, my line height, my text decoration, and here are my styles for my H1, H2, and H3. And then I have my body, and again my body has this font family, Verdana. So this is my font family with my width, my margin, and then I have my navigation styles, and again in my navigation bars, this is how I'm controlling my style. This is my navigation, but if I have anything as my unordered list, this is how it's going to show, display inline. And then you have your once you have your A tag, which is basically the href, the linking tag, then you have a display, float, color, text decoration. You have a hover property, so when you take your mouse and hover over the link, it would change that color black. That's the font color. And then here is my section left. Okay, this is the part that I had identified right here. So this part right here, this is where I am using that rule, where I'm using some column rule. Okay, so let me point out a few of those things. So you now have this column count, which is basically making 3 columns, and by saying Mozilla and WebKit, we are actually covering most of the browser. So Mozilla definitely covers Mozilla, but the WebKit kind of covers Safari, Internet Explorer, and Mozilla. So this is how you do it, and the reason you use 3 of these things is because it kind of gives you a blanket coverage for most of the browsers. Okay, my column gap is the gap that I want to have in between these 2 rows, or between these 2 columns. I'm sorry, not rows, but the gap in between is that given by the column gap. You also have a rule width, so this is my 1 pixel, and then you have a rule color, the light blue border that you see, and then if I want to make that a border, a solid border, that's what I do, a solid light blue. So if you actually take some of the rule width out, if I take all these 1 pixels out, you will actually not see that ruler, come in between. Okay, so this one would disappear if you take that one out, and you can of course play with it. So sometimes you may have a situation where you want to separate them in individual columns, but you do not want a separation like this. I just wanted to show you all the kinds. So you can take out parts of these things if you do not need it. So as I was mentioning before, the WebKit covers the Chrome, Safari, and the Opera, and then the Mozilla is the Firefox. And then the one section that is the right is controlled. Let me go back over here. This is my section to the right, and these are my radius, the WebKit border radius. I have my section P, so if you go back on this page over here, you will see sometimes I would identify some of these sections. Okay, section class left, section class right. So, I can identify which part of the section I would like to control. And this is my right part, and the other one was this left part. So this is my right with all these styling properties that I have, my paragraph. This is my definition, the DLs, the DDs, and then you have the footer and the footer address. So that's another set of tables. I just want you to be able to use different styles. The other lecture that I had uploaded did not include any of the spanning, but I want you to be able to understand how the spanning works. Another thing that I wanted to bring up to you is this EM. This is basically a unit that you use to do some conversion. And the reason you do that is because sometimes if you are, depending upon the individual browsers, you might have some compatibility issues. So you could either write your font sizes and the margin with units like pixels or percentage. With a pixel, sometimes it becomes a little too limiting. You would rather be using percentage or EMs, which are kind of relative to the content that you have, for more compatibility reasons. This is a term that you will see being used a lot in when you're trying to get into the typography. And if you haven't seen anything like this before, that's why I wanted to bring it to your attention. So all these things about 0.7 EM are basically a way of, it's a unit that you're using to control the size. So either you can use a percentage or pixel or EM, okay? And that should conclude my lecture for my table, and I would move on to a new topic in the next lecture. Thank you.